What if I told you that the most powerful love story of our generation began with a business transaction in the heart of Texas? A story where a 21-year-old woman and a 42-year-old tech mogul discover that sometimes the most unexpected arrangements can lead to the most extraordinary transformations. Before we dive into this emotional roller coaster, tell me, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments. And if you're ready for a story that will make you believe in love, again, hit that subscribe button and give us a like. Trust me, you won't want to miss a single chapter of Zara and Phoenix's incredible journey. The Charleston morning sun cast long shadows across the Reed mansion's marble floors. As Zara Wilde pressed her ear against the heavy oak door of Carter's study, her guardian's voice, usually commanding and confident, trembled with barely contained panic. "Phoenix, you don't understand," Carter whispered into the phone, his words cutting through the silence like broken glass. "I've lost everything. The cryptocurrency crash, the failed startups. I'm drowning." Zara's heart hammered against her ribs. At 21, she had grown accustomed to being an afterthought in the Reed household. Ever since her parents had disappeared during a research expedition in the Amazon 5 years ago. But this conversation felt different, dangerous. "What are you suggesting, Carter?" The voice on the speakerphone was deep, measured with a slight Texas drawl that somehow commanded attention even through the static. Carter's chair creaked as he leaned forward. "My ward Zara, she's extraordinary, Phoenix. Beautiful, intelligent, graceful. You met her briefly at the sustainability conference last year. I know you remember her." Silence stretched across the connection like a taut wire. "So you're talking about marriage?" Phoenix Cruz finally said, his tone unreadable. "A partnership," Carter corrected, desperately. "For $1 million would clear my debts and give me a fresh start. And you'd get someone remarkable by your side." Zara's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a gasp. Her guardian, the man who had taken her in when she had nowhere else to go, was selling her like a piece of property. "I need time to think." Phoenix's voice cut through her spinning thoughts. "Of course, but Phoenix, time is something I don't have much of." The call ended with a soft click, leaving Zara frozen in the hallway, her entire world crumbling around her. She had always known Carter viewed her as a burden, but this betrayal cut deeper than she had ever imagined possible. That evening, as rain pelted the mansion's windows, Zara stared at her reflection in her bedroom mirror. Green-gray eyes that her mother had always said held storms looked back at her, framed by dark chestnut hair that caught the light like silk. She thought of Phoenix Cruz, the enigmatic tech mogul she had met so briefly, whose intense gaze had lingered in her memory far longer than appropriate. Her phone buzzed, a text from Carter. "Pack your finest dresses. We're flying to Austin tomorrow. Our future depends on it." As thunder rolled across the South Carolina sky, Zara realized her life was about to change forever. But she had no idea that her greatest challenge would become her most beautiful transformation. From the 46th floor of his penthouse, Damien Everhart, the reclusive and silver-templed millionaire, watched the droplets glide down the glass like soft tears. He stood still, his silhouette sharp against the golden haze of the city lights. He was a man of iron discipline and taste. His suits were custom, his scotch aged 2 decades, and his emotions sealed beneath layers of control. Until her. Amara wasn't like the women he was used to, those who knew what to wear, what to say, how to disarm with charm. No, she was untouched in more ways than one. Pure in spirit. Her innocence wasn't naive, but rare. Like finding poetry in a place no one looks. She stood in the living room now, her fingers grazing the edge of his antique grand piano, her eyes absorbing the magnificence around her, but never consumed by it. She wore a long emerald dress Heed had delivered earlier. He hadn't expected it to fit so perfectly, to cradle her grace so exquisitely. Damien had met her 2 months earlier at a charity fundraiser. She wasn't supposed to be there, she worked at the catering company. But while the rich talked over champagne flutes, he watched her from across the room. She wasn't trying to be noticed, and that's what made her unforgettable. He invited her for coffee the next morning. She hesitated, said she didn't date wealthy men, said they were all the same. But there was something in his eyes, some quiet ache that matched her own, that made her say yes. Now here they were. She turned from the piano slowly, her gaze meeting his. "I still can't believe I'm here," she whispered, half smiling. "You don't have to believe it," Damien replied, walking toward her. Just feel safe. That's when everything slowed. Time folded into silence. No music played, but the air throbbed with anticipation. He reached out, not to pull her in, but to offer her the decision. He placed his palm near hers. A silent invitation. Amara looked at it, then into his eyes. I told you before, she said softly. I've never, not with anyone. And I told you, Damien said, his voice low and reverent, that I would never take what you're not ready to give. He didn't kiss her. He didn't undress her. Instead, he led her to the glass wall where the city stretched like an endless dream. He wrapped a velvet shawl around her shoulders and handed her a glass of warm tea instead of wine. You're not what I expected, she said, her voice shaky. And neither are you, he replied. The night didn't unfold with passion, but with something rarer, patience. He told her stories. Of a time before the money. Of the betrayal that built his walls. Of the woman who took everything but his name, and how he had vowed never to love again. Until the universe sent him a girl who didn't ask for anything except his truth. Amara listened, each story peeling back the layers of the man she thought was untouchable. And when he asked about her, she opened gently, like dawn breaking behind closed clouds. He didn't touch her skin. Instead, he touched something deeper. At midnight, he took her hand and led her to his library. There, beneath a vaulted ceiling and shelves that smelled of old pages and older secrets, he pulled out a first edition of Wuthering Heights. He read to her. She curled up beside him on the chaise lounge as his voice painted worlds in the dim amber light. The storm outside raged louder, but inside that room, peace bloomed. At 3 a.m., her head rested on his shoulder. Asleep, that he watched her for a long while. She looked like everything he'd run from, and everything he'd been running toward, that he didn't carry her to bed, that he carried a blanket instead and gently tucked it around her. Then, barefoot and quiet, he sat beside her until the sun returned. When Amara woke up, she found a note folded neatly beneath her hand. You were never mine to take. But if ever you decide I am someone to trust, I will wait, not for your body, but for the day your soul feels safe with mine. She read it twice, then again. Tears welled, not from pain, but from the beauty of being seen, not claimed. Later that morning, as he brewed fresh coffee, she walked into the kitchen barefoot, her hair tousled from sleep. I thought, she began, that I'd want more from you, he asked. She nodded. I do want more, he said, meeting her eyes. But not like that. And just like that, the rules of desire were rewritten, not in fire and urgency, but in tenderness and time. But the story was only beginning. Amara stood there in the soft morning light, her fingers nervously brushing a strand of hair behind her ear. The kitchen smelled of cinnamon and dark roast coffee, the kind that filled the senses before it even touched the tongue. Damien moved with the same graceful deliberation he always did, pouring her a cup with quiet care and setting it before her like a ritual. She didn't know what to say. No man had ever made her feel like this before. Not just respected, but cherished, like something rare and irreplaceable. And it was unnerving in a way, because she was used to being overlooked, passed by like a detail no one noticed. But here in his world, full of grand paintings, rare books, and unspeakable wealth, she felt more seen than she ever had in her entire life. Did you sleep at all? She asked softly, wrapping her hands around the warm ceramic mug. He glanced up at her, a faint smile dancing across the edges of his lips. Enough to dream, he said. You. I did, she replied. But I don't think it was sleep. It felt like floating. He watched her then, his gaze unreadable, but something about it made her feel as though the ground had tilted slightly beneath her feet. Damien Everhart was not just a millionaire. He was a man who had tasted the bitterness of betrayal, the emptiness of success, and the loneliness of luxury. And here she was, a woman who had never even traveled beyond state lines, standing barefoot in his kitchen as though she belonged. She didn't, though. Not really. Not in the way that mattered. I don't know what to do with this, she admitted suddenly, the words escaping her before she could gather them. With what? He asked, stirring honey into his cup. You, she said, then laughed nervously. This. Us. I don't even know if there is in US. I mean, how could there be? You're everything. And I'm just. Don't, he interrupted gently, setting down his spoon and leaning on the counter, his full attention on her now. Don't reduce yourself like that. You walked into that room and did something none of the others could. What's that? You made me stop pretending I was whole. The words hung between them, vulnerable and unguarded. Amara blinked. the weight of them settling somewhere in her chest like warmth instead of burden. She looked around his penthouse, noticing details she hadn't before. The art wasn't just for display, it had meaning. A painting of a woman alone in a storm. A sculpture of a broken violin. A photograph of a boy standing at a grave. These weren't decorative, they were scars preserved in glass and frame. "Do you bring many women here?" she asked, the question almost involuntary. He smiled again, but this one was quieter, sadder. None. That surprised her. She tried to read him, to understand why a man with power, looks, and access could choose silence and isolation. But perhaps it wasn't a choice. Perhaps it was the only way to protect what remained of him. "I don't know why you picked me," she said, almost whispering. Damien crossed the space between them, but didn't touch her. He simply stood near enough for her to feel his presence. "I didn't pick you," he said. "You appeared. At a time I'd stopped believing in unexpected things." Amara felt a tremor inside her, like something old had cracked open. She had spent years believing love was either a fairy tale or a transaction. She'd seen friends use their innocence as bait and watched men treat it like currency. But here was a man who had the means to buy whatever he wanted, yet chose to wait. "Why didn't you?" she asked quietly. "Last night. You could have. I would have let you." He nodded slowly. "I know. Then why?" He looked at her, eyes steady. "Because you were willing to give me your body to protect your heart. And I couldn't take one while wounding the other." The honesty made her eyes sting. She didn't cry often. Life had trained her to harden, to hold it in. But this man, this stranger who knew things about her she hadn't even admitted to herself, was making her feel things so real they left no room for defense. They stood in silence for a while, sipping coffee, letting the city breathe around them. Then he broke it with a question so gentle it nearly went unnoticed. "Would you like to stay, just for today?" Amara hesitated. Everything inside her screamed to run. Not because she was afraid of him, but because she was afraid of what she might become in his world, addicted to comfort, to attention, to this kind of care. But she also knew she didn't want to walk away just yet. "Just today," she agreed, the words tinged with something almost hopeful. They spent the day like two old souls rediscovering simplicity. Damien took her to his rooftop garden, a sanctuary above the noise. There were orchids and lavender and a single cherry blossom tree, its petals fluttering in the soft wind like pink snow. He told her he had it flown in from Japan because it reminded him of his mother, who used to take him to the park before she passed. Amara listened, occasionally touching a leaf, watching bees hover and dart between the blooms. He brought her a sketchbook and some charcoal pencils. "I don't draw," she said. "You don't need to," he replied. "Just feel something and let your hand move." She looked at him, skeptical, but tried. Minutes passed, maybe hours, and when she finally looked down, she realized she had drawn not a flower, or the tree, or even him, but a pair of hands holding a shattered heart, and vines growing through the cracks. Damien saw it and didn't speak. He just nodded once solemnly. That's not bad for someone who says she doesn't draw. They had lunch on the terrace, simple roasted vegetables, artisan bread, sparkling water with cucumber. He didn't push conversation, and she didn't feel the need to fill silence. It was natural, and unfamiliar, and healing. Later, they listened to vinyl records in his music room. Old jazz. Miles Davis, Billie Holiday. He told her how he once wanted to be a composer before the world told him success was more valuable than soul. "And now?" she asked. "Now I want to find both," he said. As the day stretched into early evening, Amara began to feel something strange, safety. It was intoxicating. She'd never known it without a price. But when the sun dipped low and the sky turned to honey and bruised blue, she realized the magic couldn't last. At least not indefinitely. "I should go," she said, standing near the glass balcony where it had all started the night before. Damien walked to her slowly. "I won't stop you." She nodded. "I know." But he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. Not jewelry, not keys, a single pressed flower, a forget-me-not, perfectly preserved. "It's from the first bouquet I saw you hold. At the fundraiser," he said. "You were tucking one into your apron when you thought no one noticed." She looked at it, stunned. Her hands trembled slightly as she accepted it. "I didn't think you saw me then." "I saw only you," he said. The evening wind whispered between them. Her taxi was waiting downstairs, but the weight of her heart said she hadn't truly arrived anywhere until she'd come here. And yet she wasn't ready to stay. Not yet. But the story between them had changed. It wasn't about purity or power anymore. It was about two people who found each other at the edge of their own brokenness and decided, for one unforgettable day, to begin the quiet work of being whole again. As she walked toward the elevator, flower in hand, she didn't look back. But she felt his eyes on her, not possessive, not desperate, just present, waiting, willing, and maybe, just maybe, hers. She stood alone in the elevator, her heart pounding in rhythms unfamiliar, echoing the storm of emotions that danced just beneath her skin. The doors slid shut with a quiet sigh, separating her from him, not just physically, but symbolically. And yet, as the elevator descended floor by floor, something inside her rose. A feeling she couldn't name, but one she'd never felt before. Not infatuation, not lust. Something deeper. Something that couldn't be bought, seduced, or manufactured. When she stepped out onto the city street, the wind felt different. The world hadn't changed, but she had. She carried with her a pressed forget-me-not and a memory of a night that never turned physical, but somehow touched her in ways no one else ever had. She thought about the way he had looked at her, not like a conquest or a possession, but like a story he wanted to read slowly, page by page, without skipping ahead. For the first time in her life, she didn't feel like a girl trying to be enough. She felt like a woman becoming something more. And Damien, he remained at the window long after she disappeared from sight. He didn't pour himself a drink. He didn't retreat into solitude. He simply watched the sky dim, letting the silence hold him. The scent of her perfume lingered faintly in the air, sweet, floral, with a hint of warmth, like spring breaking through winter. He walked to the piano, sat down, and without thought began to play. It had been years. The keys were slightly dusty, but the melody came back to him, not because he remembered it, but because she had awakened it. A piece he never finished. Now it was whole. The notes weren't perfect, but they were honest. Each chord carried the weight of restraint. Each pause echoed a choice made not from desire, but from devotion. And the crescendo, soft, tender, felt like a prayer whispered into the night for a woman who had trusted him with her presence, her vulnerability, her truth. He didn't know if she would return. He hadn't asked for promises. She owed him nothing. But she had left behind something no one else ever had. Hope. For days after, Amara carried the memory of his eyes, the way they had held hers with such reverence, as if she were sacred. Her friends wouldn't understand. They would ask, "You spent the night in a billionaire's penthouse, and nothing happened?" And she would smile softly and reply, "Everything happened." Because it did. In a world where everyone seemed to take, he gave. Not gifts. Not wealth. He gave her space. Space to breathe. To be seen. To be known, not just touched. And in that space, she found the most intimate experience of all. She began to write about it. Just for herself, in the margins of old notebooks. Words spilled from her like water from a cracked jar, unrefined, but real. She wrote about the way he poured her tea instead of wine. How he watched her draw, not for skill, but for feeling. How he didn't ask for her body, but waited for her heart. She found herself returning to places that reminded her of him. A rooftop cafe, an old bookstore with creaky wooden floors, the park bench beneath the willow tree. And each time, she wondered if the universe was moving her toward him again, or simply teaching her to become whole before reuniting her with someone who could truly hold her soul. Weeks passed. Then, one morning, as she walked through the farmer's market, her eyes caught a glimpse of something familiar. A cherry blossom branch. Delicate. Imperfect. Beautiful. Attached to it, a small handwritten card. For the one who made music return to silence, and drew vines through the cracks of a forgotten heart. I'm still waiting, not to change you, but to walk beside whoever you become. No name. No signature. Just truth. She pressed the card to her chest and closed her eyes, and for the first time since leaving his penthouse, she cried. Not tears of longing, but of awakening. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about what he helped her find inside herself. The strength to pause. The courage to trust. The power to say not yet, and be honored for it. And Damien, back in his penthouse, no longer measured time in meetings and market trends. He played music. He wrote letters he never sent. He walked through his rooftop garden with a softness he'd forgotten he possessed. And every day, he left a single chair open, by the piano, on the terrace, in the garden, just in case she came back. But it wasn't desperation. It was faith. Because he understood now what few ever did. The rarest kind of love is the one that waits. Not because it needs to, but because it's worthy. One morning, months later, As the cherry blossoms bloomed in full, she returned. No announcement. No warning. Just her, standing quietly at his door with the pressed flowers still in her hand, slightly faded but whole. He opened the door, not surprised, only still, and without a word, she stepped into his world again. Not as a visitor, but as someone ready. Ready not for a night, but for something timeless.